greetings there, everybody. It's GleeCon. Here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. It's been a couple days since the last episode. Normally, you know me, I don't take those days off very often, but it's just been a very busy, the holiday season here. It's a very busy time of year. I was swamped with work, and then we had my daughter's graduation from college, so it was fun. But it took, there were festivities involving that. And my old football team here is going to give me a heart attack. So yeah, it would not be surprising if you guys just found out that I was in like the cardiac unit, surviving watching these games every week. Although it's been a fun ride this year, I'm not taking it for granted. Anyway, on our last episode, I am back. Don't be worried. We'll be cranking them out with regularity, especially after these next few days. We get to buy them, work, we'll chill out. So the last episode we did in this side thing we've been doing, we looked at, I think, something called Magic and Mayhem, where we looked at some alternative, really a lot of technology, Steam Knights, and some other magical classes and approaches. Really cool. In a cool way, we have the forerunner to both engineering and inscription. We have glyphs, glyph warriors or something like that. That's not really a thing in World of Warcraft, but there are little seeds of it that I think they ran with later on. And we're still going through Cycle of Hatred, where the Burning Blade is being revealed to be behind some of the conflict, but I don't think it's going to stop the inevitable battles between Horde and Alliance. And we've been looking at some of the just chronicles and stuff like that. So stay a while and listen as we read another part of this Warcraft role-playing game campaign setting source material. This one's called Lands of Conflict. Don't know what it's about, but I'm sure it's just some extra rules and stuff. So what are we here for? We're here for the flavor text and anything interesting. Oh, look at this. It says Rene Rouge-Quel-Quater. I don't know who that is, but they've got a memorial to him. So this book was released in 2004 in March. So this is I think the game came out September, October, November, somewhere around there of 2004. So we're 6 months away from the release of that. But his twin brother, Michel, passed away from unexpected heart failure. In a matter of 3 days, he progressed from a simple fever to a life-threatening situation, which in the end took his life at the age of 19. Wow, so this person has a 19-year-old twin brother. I want to thank you for your support in the years we worked and lived together. Thank you, art communities and art supporters, for bringing so much joy to my brother and me. Although we are separated physically, we will always be twin cruiser in spiritual essence. That's quite sad. Obscure. They're from the Netherlands, I'm guessing, and it sounds like they are artists on some of the work we're going to see. Okay, so we've got a Worgen. Are we finally bringing Worgen into the fray, into the fold? That'd be cool. This looks like what are those guys called? Man, this not. Trying to remember what the heck they're called. They're in Northrend. They're in BFA. They are like the little stinky rock people. They're based on Dungeons and Dragons. Troglodytes, something like that. Naga, and then this looks like, I don't know, some kind of cool looking knight, paladin, something. All right. Special thanks. And how it's dedicated to the memory of the Michel there. Excuse me. All right, let's read some flavor text. Pike's chest heaved with the strain of trying to breathe properly as he lay in the dirt. His entire left side felt as if it were on fire. His arm throbbed as though it had been crushed in an artisan's vice. He spat and was unsurprised that he could taste blood in his mouth. Still, he was alive, and that was something more than he thought possible a few moments before. The knight rolled himself over and attempted to stand. Bracing himself against the bulk of a nearby tree, he managed to gain his feet. Squinting in the bright sunlight, Pike surveyed his surroundings. His old shield lay shattered and torn on the ground a few steps away, but the stout warhammer that was still by his side appeared unmarred. He looked down at his surcoat and saw it torn to rags, his armor barely held onto his frame by a few ragged leather straps. Still, Pike smiled once again at the fact that he wasn't dead. Recalling the reason he was still alive to ponder these things, he limped over to the prone figure lying a few feet away. The large orc was struggling to pull himself to his feet. His bare leg was a mass of gashes, and his dark chainmail hung loose and torn about his thickly muscled frame. Still, the orc had the presence of mind to keep a grip on his weapons, a pair of wicked-looking twin axes still covered in gore from the beast. The beast in question was a massive reptile that lay dead in the center of the clearing, just a few yards from where it had erupted from the thick underbrush a short while before. When it had first roared, Pike whirled about and brought up his shield by reflex, just as the monster reached him. It struck ferociously, a blur of claws and fangs. Pike was forced back step by step, never given a clear shot to strike back with his warhammer. The creature attacked relentlessly. A killing blow was inevitable. Then Pike heard the second roar, but this one did not come from the creature. Duncan Pike knew somewhere in the Swamp of Sorrows there was a horde settlement called Stonnard, but he hadn't thought himself close enough to run into one of its inhabitants. His mission was to carry orders to a secret covey, keeping watch on the borders of the human swampland. He never expected he would actually see an orc. The savage warrior had come howling from the trees and had thrown himself on the beast in a berserker rage. The orc's twin axes pounded a savage rhythm deep into the monstrous lizard's scaled flesh and rough bone. Bellowing in pain, the scaled predator swung around to address the new attacker, and it was then that Pike received his opening. With a battle cry of his own, he brought his hammer down again and again on the creature's scaled hide. The two warriors engaged the creature for what seemed like forever before it finally fell and lay still. Now Duncan Pike found himself in a dilemma. He looked down at the wounded orc who was his enemy, but who also had doubtless saved his life, and why? Pike's brown eyes were met the pale green of the orc's. For a moment he remembered that his father, a simple man, had taught him to judge others by their actions, not by any other measure. Maybe somewhere along the line someone had told this orc the same thing. He offered his hand to the green-skinned warrior, who gave a sharp-toothed grin and accepted the assistance. The powerfully built orc weighed a hefty load, but Pike managed to pull him out of the dirt. Speaking not a word of the orc's rough language, Pike started laughing at the absurdity of the situation. The orc started in with a guttural laugh, and for a moment the two warriors understood each other perfectly. "Come on," muttered Pike. "I know of a goblin outpost not far from here. We can both get in there. I don't use some coin to pay them, because I sure don't." The orc warrior seemed to understand the gist, and his fanged grin got even wider. Together, they limped back into the deep forest and away from the corpse of their fallen foe. Cool. So, we're addressing things that are bigger than the Horde and the Alliance, and the fact that they can work together in some of these neutral settlements. I don't remember what the one in Swamp of Sorrows is called, but maybe that's Mud Sprocket. I'm not sure. But as you can see here, I guess that's who we just saw. The human and the orc helping each other. Yeah, he's got the twin axes. He's got the hammer. Introduction. It says, to His Highness King Magni Bronzebeard, rightful sovereign of Ironforge and Dunmorog, and Grand Explorer of the Guild, to High Explorer Tomley McGillis, and all august members of the Excursion Council. The task you set me many months ago is completed, then Khazgroth, and I now present the results of my travels and my research in this modest volume. I've titled it simply Lands of Conflict, for conflict describes rather aptly the current sorry state of affairs throughout the eastern continents, and what must continue if the nations of the East will one day destroy the Scourge. So maybe this is the opening the campaign setting for Lordaeron, or the Eastern Kingdoms. You might see fit to send a copy west across the sea, for reading it may encourage Miss Proudmoore and War Chief Thrall to return home and lend a hand in dealing with Kel'Thuzad and his minions. Certainly those strange night elves in that damnable frozen throne cannot mean as much as the ravaging of their former lands and the destitute, fearful lives of their former peoples. Forgive me, but a weary dwarf can still dream. All the world's troubles of the past decades, nay, even the past centuries, find their roots here, in the East, and they must come to a resolution upon the blighted soil of the Plague Lands, in the streets of Stormwind, at the gates of Ironforge itself. While I encountered much weariness and isolation throughout the Eastern lands, I also saw much determination and even hope. I believe we can rid ourselves of the undead and the demons. We will, of course, need the right people in positions of influence and a general consensus that working together produces better results than petty bickering. Yet the seeds of a combined resistance are at least planted. The account given in this humble tome should offer His Highness and the Explorers Guild ample guidance for how to act against the Lich King in the next days and years. I shall proceed to summarize the book's contents and note the function of any of its special features for the reader's benefit. Okay, so we're getting sort of like fictitious with the reason of this book, which is cool. All right, I'm not going to read the summary or about the sidebars or the cross-reference or anything like that, but I like that this is written by Bran Bronzebeard. That's funny. We'll have a little bit more flavor text, but yeah, so shaping up that's what I think this book's going to be about. Garrick. The question came out in a raspy whisper from lips that were withered and sickly pale. Still, the sound of that familiar voice rekindled the flame of hope in Garrick's heart. Yes, Adric, it's me. It's Garrick. I found you at last. He looked at the face of his childhood friend with all the compassion he could muster. The young wizard apprentice had entered this patch of blighted forest some time ago, and finally his efforts had paid off. Good old Adric stood on the crest of the hill nearby, motionless as only the dead can be. Adric's skin was so shrunken that the bones beneath were almost visible. From his empty eye sockets, a pale yellow light glowed like twin lanterns, and his tattered clothes barely hung on his thin frame. Still, despite all this, there was no mistaking his childhood friend. The undead lowered the old crossbow he carried and continued to stare incredulously. I came to find you, Adric, once I heard about a dead man in these woods. A dead man with a crossbow that matched your old family one. Remember, we used to practice with it together as boys. I'd know it anywhere. The dead man lowered his head sadly. Oh, Garrick, you shouldn't have come here. Garrick spoke quickly. Don't despair, Adric. I've come on a mission. My master, he is one of the mages who seeks to reclaim Dalaran. He sent me here to take observations on the spread of the Scourge's plague. Once I heard your description from a woodsman, I abandoned my master's research and set off in this direction. I just knew I could find you. You see, my master is working on a way to reverse the plague. He only has theories right now, but when you come back with me, we can work on it together. It may take some time, but with you there, the research will go much faster. Adric raised his head and once again focused his mournful eyes on Garrick. It's far too late for help, old friend. Garrick raised his voice in passionate anger. I refuse to believe that. We can undo this, don't you see that? Come with me now. You don't have to exist like this anymore. Just follow me back to my cottage. It's not far away. I can sneak you into the city. You can meet my outmaster and we can get started right away. This plague can be reversed, maybe for everyone. My cart is just this way. Garrick turned and started back down the hill in the direction he had come. He took just a few steps when he caught a sound he had not heard since his childhood. The twang of a particular crossbow being fired. His back exploded in pain and he found himself wondering who had punched him so hard. The blow upended him as he fell down the hill, unable to get a grasp of the slippery bed of leaves that covered the ground. He turned over painfully again and again until his momentum ceased at last and he rolled up against the stump of a tree. Garrick's legs were numb and he found he couldn't breathe quite right. His lower back was a riot of pain from where the bolt struck. Yet over his own raspy breathing he heard the thumping of ragged boots making their patient progress down the hill. From the corner of his eye, Garrick saw his old friend sit on a large grey stone nearby. The now empty crossbow rested against the dead man's leg as Adric stared off into the dark woodlands. His hollow voice came again in a corroded whisper. I meant it, but I said you shouldn't have come here, Garrick, my old friend. Everything changed the day Prince Arthur rode here. Now everything is dead. But somehow everything goes on. If I tried, I think I could go on forever now. He then turned his baleful yellow eyes on his friend. Your largest mistake was assuming that I wanted to be cured, Garrick. Garrick couldn't hear his friend too well. He didn't feel his legs at all now, and everything was going dark around him. His own voice sounded shrill in his ears. Adric, I think I'm dying. Yes, answered Adric nonchalantly. I do believe you are. But don't worry, old friend. We'll have all the time in the world to talk once you're done with that part. So are we going to get Forsaken as a race, playable race? That'd be cool. All right, so chapter 1, history and culture. This dead dude, Arethu's back, and we're dying dude in the Forsaken. All right, so we've got Lands of the Past, campaigning in earlier eras. So if you wanted to do Lordaeron in a different time period, they're saying, hey, why not? Lands of Savagery, Lands of Magic. So they're just describing what happened in the past. Adventures at the dawn of history. So they're even, so this is not only a different place, but you can also set it in different times, even back in the times of like the Titans and stuff. Lands of Chaos, Lands of Empire. So this is a history. This is explaining the history of the world. Empire burning, building. So if you wanted to do an Empire campaign where you build your own empire over generations. Okay. Lands of Darkness, Lands of Demons. And there's a theme here as we continue to just recap. I'm not going to recap all the history. It's all, it's a lot. As you can see, it's pages and pages of it. A great and secret game. So this is also saying that you could all play that. A campaign of espionage. Lands of Storms. Lands of the Horde. Yep. And so this is all, I like that this is all written from his, Bran Bronzebeard's perspective. So if you were interested in reading it from that, this part does seem interesting. Lands of Conflict, Shadows of the Past. Shadows of the Past, Futures Dawn. Yeah, they're just... It says chapter 6 lays out a dozen different types of campaigns. And then these are specific hooks if you wanted to have these types of campaigns here in the Eastern Kingdoms for all of them. Okay. The Warcraft library. Oh, so now they've just gone on. So what has come out by the time this book has come out? Orcs and Humans, Reddit, Tides of Darkness, Beyond the Dark Portal, Reign of Chaos, The Frozen Throne. Those are the games. So we've played all through them. We have not read the strategy guides. The Warcraft Orcs and Humans official secrets and solutions. I mean, if we wanted to be real here, we could look at that, but I'm going to make a note to myself right now because those might be worth looking at. And the fact that they exist, and we will definitely go through some of them, definitely the World of Warcraft ones, but it might be worth taking a peek there and just seeing if there's any lore or anything. There's one for each expansion. Novels, there's not that much, but we have read Day of the Dragon, Lord of the Clans, The Last Guardian, and Of Blood and Honor. We've read the 4 novels that were out to that point. The War of the Ancients trilogy, we read that already. It says that was to be published in 2004. Huh. Yeah, we read that. I didn't know that was that old. The Art of Warcraft, there's actually tons of those, and we are going to look at those as well in this side stuff. And we are going to look at some of the websites. They're revamped. They're not under that, but we are going to look at them. Bronzebeard's Compendium of Essential Knowledge, or a Gadabout's Gazetteer. So I just like it. He's talking all this different stuff, but it is, so you could read this as a, like almost like a short story, but I'm not going to because it's not really a story. But he's talking about currency and trade. It's a picture of a little shop. The coinage that they use. There's no platinum pieces in World of Warcraft. But as you know, the others, copper, silver, gold, are there, just like in Dungeons and Dragons, in different languages. The most useful souvenir a traveler can pick up in a foreign land is its tongue. Travel, overland travel, traveling by Zeppelin, goblin shops, so they're neutral. Stuff for sale, stuffy. Rolo Tanglefoot, prop. Different goblin goods you can buy. So, probably technological stuff. Oh, and now a detailed history of Azeroth. Gives us, okay, once more through history before we can take a look at how things have turned out. With a full-on timeline. Okay, so let's just kind of hit the high notes here. 147,000 years ago. So, note to self, they actually have somehow determined the carbon dating of that time period. Titans arrive. And dwarves are placed in charge of maintaining the earth. Sea giants over the waters. That's not necessarily canon. 65,000. Continent, Kalimdor, Well of Eternity. 6401. Dragons become the aspects. Negative 14,000. The Kaldarai rise. In the book we read, they do come from the Dark Troll. 500 years later, they start practicing magic, and the Highborn evolve. 2,000 years after that, they've descended into decadence. 1,250 years later, they draw the attraction of the Burning Legion, and over the next 250 years, they're slowly opening a portal. And in the 10,000 years ago, the Burning Legion comes to, you have the War of Ancients. 1 year later, the heroes stop it. Another year later, Illidan creates the new Well of Eternity and is banished, and the dragons come and make that tree. 100 years after the war, the Night Elves give up arcane magic, and druidic magic becomes more popular. Negative 7,300, the magic using Kaldarai go over to the Eastern Kingdoms. They become the High Elves. And 500 years later, the Highborn establish Quel'Thalas. Negative 3,900, they make the Sunwell. 2,800, human nation finally rises in Arathor. 100 years later, they make the Guardians of Tirisfal. 200 years later, the dwarves awaken and come out of Uldaman and make Cosmodon. 1,300 years after that, the human nation splinters into the 7 kingdoms that we basically know now. 823 negative, Aegwin fights the avatar of Sargeras and gets whatever, his body hidden inside hers or whatever it is, his spirit. 500 negative, Kil'jaeden finds Draenor. 100 negative, so 400 years later, they start manipulating Ner'zhul to take over the orcs. 54 years after that, Ner'zhul realizes it, but he gets kind of beat down, and Gul'dan takes over. 1 year later, the Shadow Council's formed, and Aegwin has the Medivh. 4 years after that, Gul'dan teaches the dark arts. Basically, warlocks start coming. 1 year later, they form the Horde and start fighting Draenor. 10 years after that, back on Azeroth, Medivh explodes and goes into a coma. 7 years later, the orcs rage and kill the Draenei. 3 years after that, they have conquered all of Draenor and basically wiped out most of the Draenei. 1 year later, they fight each other, and then 9 years later, Gul'dan starts trying to figure out how to leave, how to do something. And Medivh awakens as a grown-up. 5 years later, Sargeras sends Medivh, has Medivh basically make a connection with the orcs, and they make the portal. And that's when year 0 happens, the year of the portal. Orcs begin pouring out into the Black Morass. Year 1, Gul'dan opens that dark portal and the first war begins. Year 2, Black Hand is the leader of the Horde, and he starts fighting. Oh, it says the Horde's humiliated by a rout. I see. Then they come through and the Horde comes in. I guess the first time they're routed, the second time they're successful. Meanwhile, Duraton is killed, and Adelis Blackmore comes and gets the baby Thrall. 1 year later, Lothar kills Medivh. Year 4, Blackhand is killed by Orgrim, who replaces it, and then they take Stormwind, basically. The first war ends, and Gul'dan starts making Death Knights. In year 5, Lordaeron takes refugees in, and they start forming the larger alliance, whereas the Trolls start joining with the Horde, and the Knights of the Silver Hand are founded. The Second War begins in year 6. The things that we know happen there. All happens over the course of 1 year. Year 7, Ner'zhul opens up the other portals, and this is where we get Beyond the Dark Portal. Year 8, they come through and fight the second half of that war in Draenor. And Blackmore is meanwhile raising them. Also, Deathwing is defeated during that game. Year 10, Kil'jaeden basically sends the Lich King Ner'zhul into Northrend, and he starts corrupting Kel'Thuzad, and they start working on this plague. 4 years later, Thrall starts fighting, and 2 years later, Thrall escapes and goes and finds out he's part of he starts fighting the other orcs. 2 years after that, Thrall beats Orgrim, earns his respect, and they basically form this new horde and start freeing the slaves. 1 year later, Orgrim is slain, and Thrall is now war chief of the horde. In the year 20, the Cult of the Dam has basically infected everyone, and Arthas starts freaking out, killing people, and that's when the Third War begins. And this is basically in the Third War. They're just describing all the things happens until it ends, and that makes the Kaldari and the orcs start kind of soul searching for some new areas. In year 21, Illidan makes a portal to Outland, and he brings Kael'thas and the Blood Elves with him. In 22, they pledge allegiance, and they take control of the Black Citadel. In year 23, Arthas brings his undead to the throne, and he eventually becomes the Lich King. And then Rexxar starts working with the Horde. In year 24, Rexxar helps the Horde fight against Jaina's dad. And now year 25 is where we currently are. It says there's a non-aggression pact in Kalimdor between the Horde and Theramore Isle that is tenuous at best. Yeah, that's the book that we're reading right now. Demons roam across the continent. Each of the mortal races begins to position itself for what soon can become the most crucial period of time in the world's history. And now we have some more flavor text. Sir Antonio Kremen felt quite a fool being bound and gagged and shoved unceremoniously into the back of a small covered wagon as he was. The thugs who captured him had committed the foul deed with almost no trouble at all to themselves. In fact, from what he could decipher from their chatter at the head of the wagon, the task had gone more easily than expected. Sir Antonio could only heave a heavy sigh at that. He knew he shouldn't have taken that last heavy drink before leaving the tavern, and now he was paying for his folly. He sat back, resigned to his situation. In his younger days, he could have handled the uncouth louts with one hand secured behind his back, but such glory days were far behind him. He was an older man now, and much more dignified, he added, for his own bruised ego, with tracts of land and a large household to oversee. With the rebuilding of the city of Stormwind, his family had prospered more than in the years before the war with the orcs. They supported King Anduin Wrynn unfailingly, even during the worst of times. Yet now he would be ransomed back, much to the ruin of his house. The family had enough money to live comfortably, but the way his captors were talking, they would demand an outrageous sum for his return. And Sir Antonio had to admit that his family would pay the amount eagerly. It was a sad world indeed when love and loyalty were used so easily against the kind-hearted. With a sudden lurching motion, the wagon stopped. Sir Antonio craned his neck to peer through the knothole that he had discovered upon his rude awakening in the wagon. Two men had dismounted from the wagon and were walking toward a young maiden sitting by the side of the road. The girl was obviously a sheepherder, tending her flock. Even as she huddled in the folds of her long, baggy cloak, Sir Antonio could see she was fetchingly fair, and there was no doubt from the way the two men leered at her that they meant her no good. It was her poor luck that they spotted her. Sir Antonio knew he must warn the girl, and so did the first thing he could think of. He began to bang his head against the side of the wagon as hard as he could. Maybe the poor girl would realize that danger was upon her and flee. He would not have his carelessness be the harm of this innocent girl as well as of his family. From outside the wagon, Sir Antonio heard the sounds of a struggle and a loud groan of pain. Sir Antonio almost wept at the injustice of it when suddenly the back of the wagon sprung open. Blinking at the harsh light of day, he was shocked to see the young woman standing there, a broad smile upon her fair countenance. She leapt onto the back of the wagon and began cutting his bonds with a long, curved knife. "Hello there. You are Sir Antonio, I would presume." Her voice was confident, and under her plain brown cloak he could see she was wearing well-crafted dark leathers and fine black silk clothing. Once free of his gag, Sir Antonio could only stutter in confusion. "Yes, that is who I am. But, my dear, what about those wicked men? What has happened?" The girl smiled sweetly. "Don't worry about them, Sir Knight. They've been taken care of. By the way, thank you for the distraction you provided. It was most brave of you, though hardly necessary. I think the smaller one never even saw my knife coming. Oh, and the good King Wrynn sends his regards." "The king?" asked Sir Antonio in confusion, still trying to make sense of this turn of events. "Yes, who else do you think could make such good use of a Stormwind assassin? His instructions regarding your safe return were most specific, and frankly, there is no job too trivial if it's in the service of the royalty. His Majesty is most eager to see you home, good sir." With a sly wink, she then added, "Now, shall we turn this wagon around and go home? Or would you prefer it if we extended your trip into the countryside?" So cool, we have assassins now. Freeing them. Human assassins. Chapter 2, Azeroth. So, I guess the whole world itself is called Azeroth. Some more regions. So we now have the Blasted Lands, where they give you some stuff about that. Oh, and I like that. Some adventures you could have there. The Burning Steppes. So they're adding these with the Blackrock Deeps, Blackrock Spire, the Foothills, Fire Gut Camp, Molten Span, Ruins of Thaurissan, Deadwind Pass. The place is tiny. It's just got Karazhan and Deadwind Ogre Mountains. So they've given us the southern half of the Eastern Kingdoms, which really has not been mapped too much. So you've got Stormwind. Let me zoom in on this. Okay, so Blackrock Spire is over there, right on the edge of the Burning Steppes, with Firegut Rock, Ruins of Thaurissan, Burning Steppes, Stonewatch Keep, Tower of Ilgalar. The Red Ridge Mountains are there, Lakeshire, Northshire Abbey, Eastvale Camp, Goldshire, West Ridge, Elwyn Forest, the Tower of Azora. All of that's exactly where it is. They had to know this, because the game's getting so close to coming out. It has to be in full production. Swamp of Sorrows, Fallow Sanctuary, don't know about that. Lost Temple, Stonard, Deadwind Pass, Darkshire, Brightwood Grove, Raven Hill, those are there. Westfall, Sentinel Hill, Moonbrook, the Dead Mines, nice. Zulkunda, and that was from Warcraft 1. Stranglethorn Vale, Zul'Grub, the Tainted Scar, Dark Portal, and the other guard keep in the Blasted Lands. Zul'Mamwe, the Vile Reef, Gromgol, the Arena, and Booty Bay. That's cool. They're calling that Azeroth. But again, Azeroth is the whole world. So Duskwood, we've got some places from Elwyn Forest. So we're describing these with the new Night Watch militia. Cool. Westbrook Garrison. So a little tiny place in there. Some Commander Sumner Trask. Let's look and see if he's really there. Red Ridge Mountains. Stormwind itself as a city. General Marcus Jonathan, a 13th level fighter, and the General of Stormwind. Marcus Jonathan. Academy of Arcane Sciences, the Cathedral of Light, the Pig and Whistle, the Stockaded Vault, the Stormwind Keep. And those, so they have to be getting fed. Because even if you look like, this is very similar to the way the map is. So they are full on designing this game at this point in time. And this is not a coincidence or a seed of an idea. This is coming from behind the scenes. The game's probably like in beta or alpha or whatever at this point. Some quests: Stormwind City Guard, Stranglethorn Vale, the People and Culture, Geography, Sites and Settlements, Murky Depths Lake, Arena, Booty Bay, Vile Reef, Zulkunda, Zulnamwe, Zulgrub. Baron Revelgaz, Heat, an 8th level rogue, 8th level tinker, Goblin Leader of the Blackwater Raiders. He straight up is from the game. Bloodscalp Trolls, their commander is Hujuka. Swamp of Sorrows, Estonard, Fallow Sanctuary. I don't know about that. Maybe that's a village. History. Here's a little picture, I guess, of like a little horde place in Stonard. In the swamp. Westfall, which it's now held by the Defius Brotherhood, so that's getting talked about there. Past Due. This is the note. It says, I met a man whom I recognized as one of the architects I worked under while rebuilding Stormwind. He didn't recognize me, and taking a careful look at my axe, he chose wisely to talk instead of attack. I was friendly and didn't mention our history, choosing instead to invite him to share my supper. We chatted about it, and I learned some of his twisted mindset. He gave me a copy of this bill that he sends to Stormwind quarterly. If anyone has sympathies with the Brotherhood, it's likely they won't after reading it. So basically, in his mind, he's owed 1 million gold for his services, and that's basically the crux of the Defius Brotherhood. They feel like they got jobbed by the by Stormwind, and they want revenge and they want their money. There's Moonbrook, Deadmine, Sentinel Hill, Edwin Van Cleef. Some adventures, and there's okay, cool. So let's look at the flavor text next. The thick white snow clumped together into a slushy soup. It clung to his boots and the bottom half of his legs, adding to the weight of limbs that felt heavier by the moment already. Sorry. With each plodding step, it seemed the ground itself wanted to pull him down. Dun Morag was just coming out of the grip of a hard winter, and while the early spring weather was usually a blessing, today it only made things more difficult. The cause of this melting was overhead, and the glare of that bright yellow midday sun reflected back against the snow was blinding. His eyes stung from the sweat that rolled down his face, and it made his beard a tangled mess. And though the air remained cold, it was just warm enough to melt some of the snow, making every step a battle. His breath came in sharp gasps. Of course, this was just another day for Hanagar, Bradwarden. The dwarf had been trained to fight and survive against all kinds of odds, even learned a trick or two from the humans, mentoring to a group of their knights so as to get a wider understanding of tactics and warfare. Yet now he wondered if that training might not have been enough. The wolves had come out of nowhere. He was expecting Frostmane trolls, so the mangy scavengers were a surprise. Thinking back, Hanagar admitted that his instincts were precise, and his reactions had carried him through that initial skirmish. He took the head off a large wolf and wounded 2 more badly enough that they didn't get up again, but the rest were not giving up the chase. Now Hanagar almost regretted wearing his heavy armor on this little trip. Its protection was welcome, but its weight was another matter. The sound of harsh howling split the cold air. The wolves were closing in. Beneath the snow, a jagged rock threatened to topple the usually sturdy dwarf. He stumbled, but held his balance. Looking down, he could see that the gash in his leg was still seeping blood. The bandage he put over the bite was The bite wound was caked in the dried brown fluid, but at least it remained knotted securely in place. He was heartened little to see that, despite the pain of the impromptu walking tour of the mining trail he had just taken, he could still tie a good knot. That's just good training for you. He found those wagon ruts under the snow by luck alone. Otherwise, he could not have made his way back. Coming up over the top of the rising trail, Honegger looked down the hill and saw the muddy tracks. They almost made him laugh out loud. From his vantage point, he could just make out the main trail that wound right up the massive wood and iron doors of Ironforge itself. It was somewhere up that trail. He couldn't see it with his own eyes, but he knew it was there, waiting for him. Beyond those tall trees and white-covered rocks was his home. Within those gates and in those dark hallways, deep in the arms of earth, there was his home. A door with a hinge needed oiling. A large hammer hanging on the wall had belonged to his father. A wide hearth waited for a fire and a bed with down pillows and an old blanket, and it was home. Seeing that trail stretching out in front of him somehow cut straight through the pain dulling Honegger's senses. It would not end like this. Honegger recalled on all the discipline and dedication of a lifetime of training. Taking the cold air into his lungs with several deep, slow breaths brought everything back into sharp focus. From the trail behind him, the dwarven warrior heard another howl, much closer than before, and then another mournful call, answered from a place that was closer still. It wouldn't be long now. He must return home, and that meant surviving what was coming rapidly from behind. Pulling himself up, Honegger set his pointed helm straight on his head and brought his axe up to his shoulder. He turned around slowly and waited for the pack to come. His eyes narrowed in concentration. He would see home again. But he had some pests to deal with first. Chapter 3, Cosmodon. That's a dwarf wanting to get home. He doesn't look that interesting to me, but okay. So again, we're just describing these different, so we've got the Badlands, being a recounting of the War of the Three Hammers. So this is, the War of the Three Hammers, which we have read about in Chronicles and stuff. The Duskbelch Ogres. There's Kargath, Uldamon, Lethlor Ravine, Angor Fortress, Duskbelch Grotto. Gorn is an orc warlord at Kargath in the Badlands, a 5th level barbarian, 7th level blade master. Sorry, just getting over that. Still trying to find my way through that cold. There's Dun Morag, which has Ironforge in it. And now we have Cosmodon, which is kind of the middle of the Eastern Kingdoms. So we have Blackrock Spire down there, Duskbelch Grotto, the Badlands, Kargath, Angor Fortress, Lethlor Ravine. There's Uldamon, the dungeon, the Cauldron in the Searing Gorge, Stone Rock Pass. That's the north half of Blackrock Spire. Excavation site, Loch Modan, Dulcimar, Stone Rot Dam, the Farstriders Lodge. There's Dun Morag, Stone Rock Pass, Nomragon, Karanos, Anvilmar, Ironforge, Manethil Harbor, Algaz Gate, Grimbatal, Dragon Maw Gates, Dunmodra, the Thandal Span, and the Wetlands. So this is pulled straight from the maps of the games. Ironforge City Garrison, what that looks like. Anvilmar, Brunel Village, Frostbane Hold, Karanos, Steel Girls Depot, Nomragon. So this is, we're there. Like, this is too much. This is not this can't be a coincidence, Grimbatal, the Red Dragon Spawn Patrol of Grimbatal, so that's cool. We're getting these different areas and how to play them. So this is actually, I would say, like, if I was just reading this page per page on my own, this is the coolest one so far. And it's probably not a coincidence that it's because it's so much World of Warcraft related. An account of the freeing of Alexstrasza, so recapping that book we read. Ironforge itself, letter from Prince Arthas to King Magni. Let me read this. To King Magni, Bronzebeard, Lord of Ironforge, it is my sad duty to bring you very grim news. I am certain you know of Myrddin's mission here in Northrend to strike at the Scourge and discover useful artifacts. We fought together against the Scourge, and although I survived, Myrddin fell to the undead and demons. I grieve for my brave friend and your valiant brother, yet know that his heroic death was not in vain. For his life ensured my victory against the Lich King's minions and my recovery of the ancient sword known as Frostmourne. I shall be returning to Lordaeron soon. With Frostmourne in hand, I come to re-establish order and bring forth a shining new age. Myrddin's remaining clansmen will take his body back to Ironforge. But that doesn't happen because he actually stays there and is in like a coma and then has amnesia, which which we gets uncovered in the Northrend expansion, the Wrath of the Lich King. You cannot know how deep are my sympathies. I know that this letter offers small consolation, but I felt you should learn of Merlin's death as soon as possible. You have lost a brother, and I have lost a valued friend. May the light preserve our peoples, Prince Arthas Menethil. And here's a little map of Ironforge City. So that's cool too. We have, look here, Deep Run Tram, the Industrial Ward. We have the Hall of Magic, and the Arcane Ward. We have the Forlorn Cavern. We have the Library, which is in the Assembly of the Explorers. Yeah, sure. Industrial Ward, the Deep Run Tram. I already read that. Over here we have the Assembly of Thanes. The Great Forge, we have the High Seat. Military Ward has the Hall of Arms. There's the main gate right there. And then the Vault of Ironforge, basically the bank. Loch Modan. Yep. The things we read about: Farstrider Lodge, Stone Rot Dam, Stormpike's Excavation, Thelsamar. Gate Crashing is a potential adventure that you could have. The Searing Gorge. Altar of Storms, Cauldron. The Wetlands with Menethil Harbor, the Dragon Maul clan out there, Motor, Ironbeard's Tomb, Menethil Harbor. A Tale of Two Cities and some Orcs is an adventure you could have there. I like that they give you adventure hooks here. Here's a little picture of Menethil Harbor. Captain Stoutfist is a 9th level fighter that is the military leader at Menethil Harbor. He's a dwarf. And we've got more flavor text. Okay, so we read the Lance of Cosmodon. The aging fisherman had eyed poor old Jack with suspicion when first approached about chartering the boat, but he accepted the fare nonetheless. Gold really did make fools of most men, but not Jack. He had found a higher calling now, a destiny that would carry him farther than he had ever imagined. He watched the shoreline fade in the morning mist as the boat pulled away. Excited and also a little frightened, he was leaving his home for the first time in his life. That disappearing shore of Luron was all he had ever known. The farmhouse near South Shore had belonged to his father, and to his father before him. It was a small place, but its history stood as part of a point of pride for Jack. He had planned on spending his life there. No, he couldn't stay. It was just unrealistic. Not after those nights had come. When they appeared over the hill, Jack could tell right away that they had been badly abused. Their war horses were foaming at the mouth and almost ready to drop there in the field. All three men swayed in the saddle, barely able to give a weak request for succor. How could Jack not have taken them in? He helped them off their horses and aided them in removing their battered armor. He gave their horses food and clean water and left them in the barn. Afterwards, he did his best to make all the knights comfortable in his meager dwelling. He pulled out some old blankets from the dusty cabinet in the hall and even dug out an old chair from the barn. The knights were grateful for the courtesy, but Jack just explained that they were doing their parts in the war with the undead, and he had to do his, unglamorous though it might be. They offered him warm smiles when he told them this. Jack had only supposed they had not experienced such a simple courtesy in a long time. Some people even blamed the knights for bringing about the threat of the scourge. Poor countryman that he was, even Jack knew that this notion was ridiculous, and the knights all laughed to hear it, the pain of their wounds having faded in the warmth of gracious company. While Jack tended to the wood stove, adding some gangly carrots and a bunch of barley to the stew, the men improved enough to start talking. They laughed and shared stories, along with plans about where they were headed next. Jack listened as best he could, though being a farmer, he understood very little of what the knights discussed. Still, he was always a good listener, and so he took in as much as he was able. The poison Jack put in the stew took full effect in an hour. The barley helped mask part of the taste, and the wounded men did not have the stamina to resist it for long. With a few gurgles and twitching of limbs, the men were soon all dead. After disposing of the bodies in the hidden root cellar he kept in the woods, Jack set to work selling the farm. His neighbor didn't ask any questions when he went to sell the place. Lots of people were fleeing the area in recent times. Jack made some excuse about going to live with relatives farther south. The older farmer had nodded his head in sympathy the whole time, but Jack could see the greedy smile in his eyes. It didn't matter that Jack had sold the farm for a pittance of its worth. All of his needs would be taken care of soon. He had enough money to hire the boat that would take him where he needed to be. The cult of the Daemons contacts were pleased to learn about the knight's activities, but they advised Jack to move on to a safe place with all due haste. Compared to the gratitude of his superiors, the loss of the farm was a small price. Soon he'd arrive in that frozen place which housed larger settlements and the cult's still living members. Northrend would be a much different world than the one he had known, but he knew that there were friends waiting for him. What he told the knights was true. Everyone had to do their part in this war, even one as humble as poor old Jack. So he's a member of the Cult of the Damned, and he's poisoned the knights. There's Jack giving them poison. Chapter 4, Lordaeron. So now we're doing that final part of the Eastern Kingdoms. I never really thought of it. I always thought of the Eastern Kingdoms kind of divided into a top and bottom because that's how the map works when you click it. But you could definitely think of it as 3 regions. So there are the Alterac Mountains. There's Mugthol, a 7th level barbarian ogre warlord at Alterac City. And there's the Crushridge Ogre Marching Song. Who kills every kid and man? Crushridge Clan. Who burns just because they can? Crushridge Clan. Rip 'em up, slice 'em up, beat 'em to a pulp. Will they live? Will they win? We say nope. Kick 'em, hit 'em, listen to their moans, spill their blood, and crack their bones. Who just charges in without a plan? The ogres of Crushridge Clan. Alright, so there's the Crushridge ogres up there, the Uplands, Foothill Caverns, Lordamere Lake, Sites and Settlements, Alterac City, Durnhold Keep, Lordamere Internment Camps, Strombrad, yep, those are all there. Okay, between Ogres and Hardplace, the Arathi Highlands, that has Stromguard and Hammerfall. Yep, this is where some PvP gets started. Hammerfall, Stromguard. Prince Galen Trollbane is a 4th level fighter, 2nd level aristocrat of the human male of the Arathi Highlands. Robber Beware. So there is the Syndicate there. It's always been a faction I just feel like I don't know if it was just never fleshed out. I never really was able to do much with them. Alright, Dalaran itself. I thought that it was like, it says a magical dome surrounds the fallen broken city of Dalaran. Okay, Stromguard Defenders. Dome on the range. And I do know eventually it has to get moved to Northrend. I'm still waiting for when that happens. Eastern Plaguelands, Stratholme. Yes, this is all Scourge Land. Anserum Runeweaver, a 13th level wizard, 5th level archmage, who's an archmage of the Kirin Tor in Dalaran. That's cool. Don't know if he's still there. Here's a map of Lordaeron. Okay, so we've already read up to here, but now you can see Kultiras there. Crestfall, that's from Warcraft 2. Zildare, Toldrad, Gilneas, the Greymane Wall, the Hillsbrad Foothills, South Shore, Hillsbrad, Terran Mill, Dalaran, Alterac Ruins, Alterac, Airy Peak Hinterlands, the Arathi Highlands with Stromguard, Tyr's Hand, Caradaro in the lake there, Alterac itself, Enderhall, Western Plaguelands, Eastern Plaguelands, Hearthglen, Ambermill, Pyrewood, Shadowfang Keep, Silverpine, the Sepulchre, Deathnell, Fenris Isle, the Undercity, Brill. Move over here, Stratholme, the Shrine of Ulzatek, Zulaman, Mysara Hills, Quel'Thalas, Silver Moon, and the Sunwell Grove. Yeah, so pretty fleshed out. There's a poison mist over the eastern and western Plaguelands. Darrowmere Lake, Caradaro, Tyr's Hand. We have an excerpt of a conversation between General Abendis and Ban Bronzebeard. Never fear, dwarf. The holy light itself has blessed us, and we shall be triumphant. Give it 2 years. In 2 years, if humans again do not hold all of Lordaeron, I will buy you an ale. What say you to that, dwarf? I'll never get my ale, but good luck, General. Stratholme is a dictatorship ruled by the Lich Lord of the Plaguelands, Kel'Thuzad. Gilneas is a hereditary monarchy by Gen Greymane. Last known speech from Gen Greymane, recorded by Maestrum Runedance. Damn the orcs, damn the alliance, and damn you. The last thing Gilneas needs is sponges from other nations drawing from our resources. Dalaran wizards meddling with our affairs, and someone else's enemies killing our soldiers. Gilneas is its own nation, and it always will be. This is the last time I'll ever talk to you, Tyrannus, so I hope you were listening. Zildare. I didn't realize Zildare was considered part of Gilneas. I forgot that. The Greymane Wall. There's not a lot, yeah, unless you wanted to go over the wall. Hillsbrad Foothills has South Shore. Durnhold Keep, Terran Mill. Something fishy, a syndicate adventure there. The Hinterlands has Airy Peak. Saradane, that is there. Looks like a picture of Wildhammer Dwarf. Jinta Allure, Quilden Alad, Shudra Allure. Kultiris has Borealis, which Borealis. Oh yeah, duh. That is the capital actually. That is what they still keep. So this is neat because I don't think we've heard of Borealis being called the capital of Kultiris before. So this was obviously something written, and that is what the capital is called way later in BFA when you go there. So that's pretty interesting. There's Crestfall as part of Kultiris and the sea. Tol Barad, Prison Break mission you could do. Silverpine Forest has Amber Mill, unknown population, Firewood Village. I saw some text there. The Death Guard live there. Dirthus Bone Shod. So a Forsaken fighter, yes. So they're gonna have some Forsaken. We did get that race, that playable race last time. The Worgen Curse, notes of Archmage Alphys Wordwill. Sorry. Only one place in all of Lordaeron bears traces of this strange curse, the fortress of Shadowfang Keep and nearby Pyrewood Village in Silverpine Forest. I believe that this curse is somehow tied to the moon. When the full moon rises, those affected by this curse undergo a transformation, turning into strange werewolf hybrid creatures. This transformation is mental as well as physical. The Worgen, if I may call them that, desire to hunt, slay, and eat, no matter their dispositions. As humans during the day, then at night, under the full moon, these individuals are bloodthirsty monsters. This begs the question as to what can be done with them. Are we morally correct in eliminating them as they are a danger to all mortals? I do not believe so. I believe we should find a cure if possible. This cure would not prevent the transformation. It would do more. It would preserve the afflicted individual's mindset after the transformation. Such an effect would allow good-hearted Worgen to take on fearsome physical abilities and use against the Forsaken, the Scourge, and other evil powers given proper funding and support. I believe that I could create such a cure. Yeah, it does happen. Alright, so there's Amber Mill, Fenris Keep, Pyrewood Village, Sepulchre, Shadowfang Keep. I found the cure for the Worgen and now I've bloody lost it. Tristful Glades, it has the Undercity. Yeah, this is a very dense region here. Do not judge us by those individuals. Judge us by our actions, being the Forsaken. Agaman Mills, Brill, Bulwark, Death Knell, Phantom Bonds. They talk about the Undercity itself, which has some horde people in it. And here's a map of the Undercity. Here is the Hall of the Dark Lady, and in the Royal Quarter, the Apothecarium is right outside it. We did read in Sylvanas, and I think it was mainly Sylvanas that we read about stuff there. The Bat Sewer entrances, that's where you can come through right there if you wanted to fly in. The War Quarter is right there with the Altar of Darkness. The Magic Quarter has the Temple of the Damned. There's also the Rogues Quarter, and the Trade Quarter has the Undercity Coffer of the Bank. Master Apothecary Farinel, an 8th level sorcerer, 2nd level expert, 2nd level dark apothecary, Forsaken race. I know we have Farinel, but I don't know if he's the guy that betrayed her or not. Because we do know that eventually happens. I think it is. There's also the Ruined Palace. Western Plagueland has Anderhall. This is a picture of a paladin crushing some undead. Hearthglen as well, and Uther's Tomb is there. There are some regions of Quel'Tha Lost. You can go into the Blackened Woods. There are runestones. Here's a salvaged High Elf letter. There's all kinds of little flavor. That's why this episode's taken so much longer. It's just all these little nugs throughout the book. Dearest Milena, I fear this may be the last time I will write to you, as I am sure you have heard the Scourge attacked Quel'Tha Lost. It is horrible. The land is destroyed. The undead killed. They killed so many. I was lucky. I hid in a basement and used my magical skills to conceal myself. When I emerged, it was into a world of corpses. Elves were rent, their limbs scattered, so much blood. I'm sorry. You do not need to know all the gruesome details. For a time I despaired of ever seeing another living elf, but a few others also survived the assault. Although sad, they were also angry, vengeful, different somehow. They have lost too much, as have I. I have lost much, and yet I feel that in addition to my home and my family and my kingdom, I have lost something truly profound and ineffable. I do not know what it is, but I feel adrift without it, muddled, edgy. I do not know if I'm making any sense. The surviving elves frighten me, Milena. They no longer call themselves High Elves. You remember Prince Kael'thas? He leads the elves now, being the last elf of noble birth. He calls his people Blood Elves, supposedly in homage of the dead. I am glad they no longer think of themselves as High Elves, for they certainly are not. Milena, they plan to raze the forest, all of it. We will not let the Scourge enjoy their plunder, declares Kael'thas. Travesty! I will try to stop this folly, but I doubt that I will be successful. These blood elves are crazed, manic, inflamed by vengeance, and fueled by this unnameable need that seethes within our consciousness. They will go on with their plans despite my efforts. They may even try to slay me, yet I still will do what I can. If I never see you again, Melina, I hope you'll dream of me at times. Your loving husband, Romao. There are Dragonhawks, so we got some stats if you want to have Dragonhawks. There's Silver Moon. Again, yeah, so this is very sparsely worked out. There's Sunstrider Spire, the Sunwell Grove. And that's because they don't include this in Warcraft. They do get to it in the Burning Crusade. It's clear that they wanted to get there, but it just wasn't ready. Wasn't within the scope of Classic. Zulaman has the Shrine of Ulatek. There's the Trolls of Zulaman, the Amanis. Scourge Missive. To my illustrious Masters, I regret to inform you that several Quel'Darai bands still wander loose in Zulaman. The elves know forest better than I, and the ghouls and zombies make a fearsome amount of noise trudging through the overgrowth. The gargoyles are somewhat more helpful. They allowed me to discover one refugee group and kill them as they slept. However, I respectfully request additional support. Incorporeal troops, shades, or ghosts perhaps, would be particularly useful. Despite the current problems, I am confident that it is only a matter of time before we finally destroy the elves. They will not join with their allies in Hillsbrad or Khazad-dûm. They will not rally together. They will not revive the Sunwell. Respectfully, Necromancer Bazad. Okay, there's some trolls. All right, we got more flavor text as we bust out another chapter. This is a lot. Okay. Can you tell me how many of them are over there? Asked Rogther from his prone position on the ground. He could not see over the large rock behind which he and his companion were concealing themselves. Crouched down on the balls of his feet next to the dwarf, Jason stretched out further to peer over the rock. His youthful brow was furrowed with the concentration of straining to see without being seen, and his long blonde hair flew like wild grass. A few moments passed, and Jason lowered himself back down behind the stone. There are at least 3 of the gangly brutes that I can see clearly. They are all armed to the teeth, he proclaimed in a whisper. Rogther tried to keep from rolling his eyes at the obvious enthusiasm in his partner's voice. Why are the young all so eager to die, he pondered. Did you see the scouts we were looking for as well? Did you see the dead men? Jason's face screwed together in a look of disgust as he answered, Undead, you mean? Well, I saw what was left of them at least. They must have walked right into that ambush. The trolls were all busy going through the travel packs, and now in collecting the axes they threw. We must have just missed all of the action, though I think it was a very short fight. At least they saved us the trouble of taking care of those scouts ourselves. Though he remembered to keep his voice down, Rogther's reply still came out as a low, angry rumble. We were supposed to track those forsaken scouts to find out where they were going and who they were going to meet up with. Curse their warty green hides, those wretched forest-dwelling trolls didn't save us any trouble. They just wasted us 3 days' worth of hard work. Jason gave Rogther a lopsided grin and went back to peering over the rock. He whispered out of the side of his mouth, Well, I was just trying to look on the bright side of things. Besides, it seems like the trolls are only looting the weapons and any scraps of armor. We can rifle the bodies when they're done and look for any strategic orders or maps they might have been carrying. Ragnar uttered a disgruntled huff, but he had to agree with the lad's point. Maybe they could salvage something for their time after all. Besides, he never would have found the Walking Dead in the first place without Jason's help. The lad's family were simple farmers near Dalaran before the mad human Prince Arthas marched an army of the shambling dead straight through their lands, poisoning the fields with the Scourge's corruption. Yet, rather than lose himself to bitterness, the lad instead offered himself as a guide and tracker to those seeking to curb the rampage of these armies of restless dead. Though inexperienced, Jason's knowledge of the area was invaluable. Jason dropped down as sudden shouts erupted from the other side of the rock. The youth's eyes were wide as he fumbled for his short blade. I think they smelled us or something. Do you think we can make a run for it? Rogthur swore and looked back at the way they had come. It was a good sprint to reach the cover of the tree line, and those forest trolls were deadly accurate with their throwing axes. No, it would have to be a fight. Well, said Jason, his lips stretching into a white-toothed grin. At least today won't be boring. He got into a squat fighting position, ready to hack at anything that showed its face around the rock. Rogthur sat up, grabbing its blunderbuss from the ground next to him. He pulled the hammer on the gun to the full-cocked position and considered his next move. Well, my stout friend, any last advice before we engage the enemy? Asked Jason. Yes, answered Rogthur in a grim tone. Just don't get in the line of fire. With that, he stood up and swung the rifle over the top of the rock. The dwarf took aim on the first raging troll that was barreling down on their hiding place. He let out a battle cry, then pulled the trigger, and the air filled with the sound of thunder. Chapter 5, we have some adventures, maybe some adventure hooks. Okay, you could have arena games, so that's cool. So there is an arena. What about my third level Pandaren healer? So it says some races introduced seem ill-suited for Azeroth, aka Eastern Kingdom adventures. This is just basically how you could make those characters fit. Does gladiator mean gladiator the class? No. There's a crowd mentality. So how you could have, this is the arena. So how this is basically like, this is an actual adventure. That's cool. So it's the second half of the book seems to be an actual adventure hook. I'm not even going to read the... it says, I don't know. So we have Panic at the Stables. All right, fine, I'll read this little part. There's a panic as word spreads to the stables. It's going to be housed with us. I fought the Legion in the Third War and saw one destroy 10 elves. Sorry, promise me you'll kill me so I don't have to fight. Your fellow gladiators no longer wear the brave and impassive expressions you're used to seeing. Their faces are naked with fear, eyes wide. Gladiators that you've known to look orcs, elves, humans, goblins, even huge torn in the face without a flinch, are weeping in the corners. They're not afraid of the chance of death in the arena. It is the certainty they fear. Every other time they fought, they had a chance. Some fear the demon will be housed with the sentients instead of in the menagerie, in the stables, where you all live under truce and where you can put fear of death behind you. Still, the show must go on. The guards, 2 large troll warriors, come to your cell and summon the next 2 to fight. Parla, young goblin rogue, and Killerim, an orc barbarian, stand and exit to the barred gate. They leave, casting sidelong glances at each other. So that's like the flavor text. I'm not going to read any more of those. I just decided as I read it. If they're within this, those are things the DM, the GM, reads aloud, while you're giving a campaign. If you've ever run or played a D&D campaign, there are certain things where you just read it verbatim. So these are some things you would fight in this campaign. Then there's a second part called Opportunity Knocks. So I'm guessing maybe a way for you to escape from the arena. Marcus is a fighter in there. What's going on outside? Part 3, the demon and the captor. So I'm guessing you're in the arena still. You're going to have to fight it. That's interesting. And then concluding the adventure. Okay, another adventure is called Dark Iron Chains. It's a 6th level adventure. And it's involving dark iron dwarves in the Badlands. That's pretty cool. It's a cool looking dark iron dwarf. A synopsis of the adventure. Why are they in the Badlands? Dungeon features, probably Dungeons of Uldaman, maybe? I don't know. There is a dungeon. Just some kind of dark iron complex. Really, I don't see a name of it anywhere. Okay, just a Badlands. Yeah, Dark Iron Chains. It's just some little dark iron mini dungeon complex. Okay, so that's neat. I would actually consider looking into this. If it wasn't for 3rd edition 3.5 rules, I would consider maybe even running this on my own, since I I do play Dungeons and Dragons. As I said, I play with my son a lot, and I have a Dungeons and Dragons group that I run once a week. Dead Men's Tales. So yeah, that's another reason why I gotta admit, like, this stuff is probably more boring for some. For me, it's interesting from that perspective as well, since it's another one of my hobbies, something that I do. A man of many hobbies. Dead Men's Tales is a third adventure, and we've got here some people fighting maybe a giant ogre. I can't tell. They're in Dead Hollow. I don't even remember where Dead Hollow is. Village of Dead Hollow. Where is it? This is an 11th level adventure. It's in the Silver Pine Forest. Okay. I'm not even going to really go into these. It's just neat that we have these adventures. There's a little mini dungeon there. Some encounters you could fight. If I see like a name that I think is notable, we can look at that and just kind of see what happens. Male Shaloub's 20 children come looking for dad. All right, and then we're already on to appendices here. The last quarter of the book is appendices, so we can skip through. There's a group called the Caretakers. Don't know if I've ever seen them. Caretakers of the Crown, Caretakers of the Ring. I don't know if I've ever heard of that. Cult of the Damned, yes. We know who they are. There's the Defiance Brotherhood, absolutely. Edwin Van Cleef, Jack Northshire. They're a big, important one. Bright Eyes, I don't know if she's really there. The Explorers Guild, absolutely. Huge Explorers Guild. This is a report on the journey to the Southland in search of the Azotha ruins. I'm not even going to read the report. That's cute. There they are, the Explorers Guild. Yes, very important organization. Royal Apothecary Society, absolutely. Tomley McGillis. I wonder, Yulani Hammersmith. I wonder if these dwarves make their name in there. Maybe, because like I said, the game is in production at this point. It has to be. Weird. I guess that's some orcs ripping apart Forsaken. Scarlet Crusade, absolutely. And they are there for Classic. Condoned by the Orions? Not really. High Journal of Bendis. Yes. Grand Inquisitor Cillian. Yes. High Lord Talon Fordring. The Stormwind Assassins. I don't know if that's what they're called. There is a group. I don't know if they're called the Stormwind Assassins. I think. Oh, it's SI7 or whatever. That's what they're called. They're not actually. So they get a new name. They're not actually called the Stormwind Assassins. But this hasn't been finished yet. It's in its beginning phases. Matthias Shaw. Then I don't know about these other two. Waltian Freemore, Fourth Assault and Eve. The Syndicate, yes, that exists, even though they're weird. And it's almost like it's just something that never got fleshed out. Aiden Perinold, and yeah, I didn't even realize that Aiden Perinold led the Syndicate. So Perinold's son, if you remember from when we were reading the Warcraft 2 book, so his son started the Syndicate. Very interesting. And Lady Bev Perinold, maybe his wife, Lord Falconrest. Okay, then there's some miscellaneous notes as you watch some dudes fighting some other things. There are some notes on certain feats. A few interesting equipments. Specific magic weapon, Troll Collar. Bastard Sword, Troll Slayer. Couple potions, flesh dissolving. Some rings. I'm just looking to see if I see anything that I noticed from the game. Wondrous items. Prestige classes. So we've got a few random. The Dark Apothecary. Okay. Not exactly a class, but I can see that. Adefius Renegade, if you wanted to play as Adefius. That's cool. A Dwarven Prospector, if you basically wanted to be an Explorers League person. That's neat. A Scarlet Crusader. Okay. I mean, I'd be like, whatever. I can see it. The Crocolisk. Yeah, so I don't know if that was in the first, if that's in Warcraft 3. I think they are. And now we're getting them in the game too. It's like a crocodile basilisk looking thing. Dragonhawks. I thought we already had those, but whatever. They do not look like that though. Dark Iron Dwarfs. here they are as a person, but there we go. You can make a Dark Armor Dwarf character. The Stranglethorn plant monster. I don't know if those exist. A Threshodon, yes. You don't know that that's what they look like. Maybe. Yeah, oh yeah, it does. And Lochmodon. Uh-huh. And Worgen. Can you make Worgen characters? I'm looking. Yeah, so you could make a Worgen character here. That's cool. All right, so that was a lot. That was a very long one. It was pretty cool, actually. That was one of the coolest ones that we've done so far, and it's inspiring me to go back and actually be not on the next one. On our next one, we're going to do even if it's a long time, we're going to go through the whole book. But starting after that, we're going to be doing a different role-playing run. And on those, I'm going to break it down. So the episodes will be more in-depth and shorter. But yeah. For now, hey, this was a doozy. I thank you so much for watching and listening. If you did, hopefully you enjoyed it, found it interesting. I thought it was kind of neat. But yeah, thanks for watching Lore of Warcraft. This episode, 5 by 5.